Zachary Davis did not grow up in what most people would call a normal home. On the surface, his life in Florida looked ordinary, even quiet. He lived with his mother, a hardworking woman trying to provide stability, and like many teenagers, he spent time online, playing video games, and navigating the confusing world of adolescence. But behind that surface, something was unraveling. From an early age, Zachary showed signs of emotional detachment. Family members would later describe him as distant, sometimes cold, as if he struggled to connect with the people around him. There were moments where his behavior raised concern, sudden mood changes, a lack of empathy, and a growing sense of isolation that only deepened as he got older. By his teenage years, those traits had intensified. Zachary became increasingly withdrawn. He spent long hours alone, immersed in his own thoughts, disconnected from reality in a way that worried those closest to him. And then, there were the warning signs, subtle at first, comments that didn't quite sit right, a fascination with dark ideas, a growing resentment that no one fully understood at the time. His relationship with his mother, while not outwardly explosive, was strained beneath the surface. There was tension, unspoken frustration, and something deeper that was building quietly. Looking back, investigators would later piece together a troubling pattern. Zachary wasn't just struggling, he was planning. In the weeks leading up to the crime, he began researching disturbing topics online, not casually, but with intent. Searches that hinted at violence, at control, at something far more calculated than a moment of anger. And yet, no one knew how serious it had become. To the outside world, Zachary Davis was just another teenager, quiet, reserved, maybe a little troubled, but inside his mind the decision had already been made, a decision that would lead to one of the most chilling cases investigators had ever seen. Because this wasn't going to be a crime of passion, it was going to be something far more disturbing, something planned, deliberate, and deeply unsettling. On a seemingly ordinary day, everything changed. Inside their Florida home, Zachary Davis carried out an act that would shock even the most experienced detectives. This wasn't sudden, it wasn't impulsive, it was calculated. At some point, Zachary attacked his mother, using a weapon with a level of brutality that suggested more than just anger. There was force, there was repetition, there was intent. What made the crime even more disturbing was what happened after. Instead of panic, instead of remorse, Zachary began to cover his tracks. He attempted to clean the scene. He moved the body. He tried to create the illusion that nothing had happened. But the truth has a way of surfacing. When authorities became involved, inconsistencies in Zachary's story quickly began to emerge. Details didn't line up. His behavior didn't match the situation. And then the evidence spoke. Investigators uncovered signs that this had been premeditated. Search history, behavioral patterns, clues that pointed to planning rather than a moment of loss of control. What they were looking at was not just a tragic crime, it was something far darker. A teenager who had not only committed murder, but had thought about it long before it happened. Neighbors were stunned, friends were confused. People who knew the family struggled to reconcile the quiet boy they had seen with the reality of what he had done. Because nothing about this case felt normal. It wasn't just the violence, it was the mindset behind it. As the investigation unfolded, one question kept coming up again and again. How could someone so young carry out something so calculated, and perhaps even more chilling? Why? When Zachary Davis sat down with investigators, the tone of the case shifted dramatically. This was the moment where answers were expected, where emotions usually break through, where reality sets in. But what detectives encountered was unsettling. Zachary appeared calm, too calm. There was no visible panic, no overwhelming grief, no emotional collapse that one might expect from someone in his position. Instead, his demeanor was controlled, almost detached. During questioning, investigators pressed him on the inconsistencies in his story. They confronted him with evidence. They challenged his version of events. And slowly, the truth began to surface. Zachary's responses were measured, calculated, at times, disturbingly matter-of-fact. It became clear that this wasn't someone who had simply lost control. This was someone who had thought about his actions and carried them out with intention. The interrogation revealed a chilling lack of empathy. Even as the reality of the crime was laid out in front of him, there was little emotional reaction. For seasoned detectives, this was one of the most disturbing aspects of the case. Not just what he had done, but how he processed it. As the case moved forward, psychological evaluations became a key focus. Experts examined his mental state, trying to understand what could drive a teenager to commit such an act. Was it a personality disorder, a deeper psychological issue, or something that had gone unnoticed for years? In court, the details of the crime painted a grim picture. The planning, the execution, the aftermath, each piece added another layer to a case that already felt difficult to comprehend, and in the end the outcome reflected the severity of what had happened. Zachary Davis would be held accountable, but even with a verdict, many questions remained unanswered, because cases like this don't just end with a sentence. They linger. They leave behind a sense of unease, a reminder that sometimes the most disturbing crimes are not committed in moments of chaos, but in moments of quiet, calculated decision.